It's a royal walkabout, but one with a difference. A hereditary monarch turned Republican politician, a king who's become a prime minister. Tsar Simeon II of Bulgaria is the first Eastern European monarch to regain power since the fall of communism. And he's done so through the ballot box, with a stunning victory in national elections last month. Tonight, an exclusive encounter with the King cum Prime Minister, a cousin of Queen Elizabeth II, through the German side of her family, the Saxe-Coburgs. Simeon Saxe-Coburg has had a storybook life.
Your Majesty, there does seem to be genuine enthusiasm amongst the people for you. What is it about you, do you think, that is appealing to the Bulgarian
about
people?
Me, I don't think there's much. It's maybe about what we are offering. Maybe in a way the historic burden I carry, but that's not my merit. It comes from my forebears, it's Bulgaria's history, but somehow maybe people see me in it.
While Simeon embodies Bulgaria's turbulent history, he also embodies its hopes for the future, of finally turning its back on the communist era and moving from the fringes of Europe into its prosperous heart. It's the extraordinary saga of one man, but also of a country, paradoxically both religious and yet once a jewel in the crown of the godless Soviet Empire. Until 12 years ago, Bulgaria was Moscow's gatekeeper against the Western bulwarks of Greece and Turkey, and a fiercely loyal member of the Warsaw Pact. Now it's a vigorous democracy, led by a victim of communism, and a royal one at that, one who dreams of restoring Bulgaria's pre-war eminence as the Switzerland of the Balkans.
The country has suffered extraordinarily, hasn't it? There's no question about that.
Unfortunately, we've been very unlucky.
And you're being seen by many people as the answer to their woes. It's a huge expectation on your shoulders, isn't it?
Far too much. And I say I only have two hands and a fairly tired head. But if we all join and really work and look forward and forget a whole lot of things and try and put this past behind us for good, chances are. Bulgaria came out of an extraordinary 500 years of Ottoman domination and really advanced enormously in those days with the technology we had then. So with today's technology, my God, I think we can really come up with some pretty quick and good results.
The King cum Prime Minister has set a deadline of 800 days to change the lives of his 8 million charges for the better. And to do that, he's assembled a team of expatriate Bulgarian businessmen, economists and lawyers to help steer the country forward. His right-hand man and campaign manager is a New York real estate magnate who describes the King's prime role as an international salesman for Bulgaria.
As we know, there is a lot of money in the world and very few good deals. We would like to make Bulgaria a good deal. These people are children of socialism. They don't know how the real capitalist system, what is all about. We're here to tell them it's not that bad, it's good.
So the agenda is to plunge the country even deeper into the currents of the free market, and also swim with mainstream Europe by joining the European Union and NATO. Already in the capital, Sofia, are all the trademarks of Western-style free enterprise. Yet the average state worker here earns a salary of $1,200 a year. And for most Bulgarians, money is in desperately short supply. It fuels a level of public corruption that pervades Bulgarian society from the top down, and which the king has pledged to eradicate.
almost any government official is desperate to get his or her hands on any money. One could imagine what the level of corruption would be if half of the national economy is put up for sale in one go by the same officials who are meant to administer the sale.
Thanks to the communists, many people still have somewhere to live in the Stalinist-style apartments that dot the main centres. But everywhere are the derelict reminders of where they used to work, the failure of the controlled economy and an entire system. The outgoing Prime Minister Ivan Kostov did what he could to revive the economy, but all the razzmatazz in the world couldn't save him.
Did Mr. Kostov deserve to die?
No, he did not. He was probably one of the better Bulgarian prime ministers since the end of communism. But like every politician, he ultimately had to carry the can for very unpopular economic measures that had to be taken, which basically eradicated inflation, but also created a large level of unemployment.
While there have been 5 elections since the fall of communism, each of which has produced a degree of reform, Bulgaria is still in an economic rut, a jobless rate of 20%, for instance, that leaves many wondering whether democracy is all it's cracked up to be. So what's happened here is remarkable even by the topsy-turvy standards of Balkans politics. The electorate repudiating mainstream politicians, not in favour of the communists, but someone the comrades toppled nearly 60 years ago, a man who's turned history well and truly on its head.
We've seen pictures of you as a child, you and your aeroplane pedal machine. Do you remember that?
Yes, indeed.
It seemed to have been an idyllic childhood that you had,
Till the age of 6.
cut short by the death of your father.
Then I became a grown-up, so that's why I feel so terribly old, because I've been a grown-up since the age of 6.
Of all the fates that Providence can deal a child, few can be as cruel as the one dealt to Simeon Saxe-Coburg, propelled in an instant onto the throne when his father, Tsar Boris, was struck down in mysterious circumstances in 1943.
There's a very famous clip of you as a boy reviewing a line of troops.
Oh, yes, one of our little guard there in Sofia.
You seem to be much older than your age at the time. It was thrust upon you, wasn't it?
Well, I suppose so, as anybody would be in the same position as me.
How did it feel to inherit the throne under those circumstances? So young.
Oh, you know, a child doesn't see it in the optique that I see it now. But I know that it did impress me very much, and the fact that people referred to me as they used to refer to Daddy, well, that suddenly shocked me.
Simeon ruled nominally for just 3 years before fate dealt him another blow, forced into exile with the communist takeover of Bulgaria in 1946.
Did you have any inkling at that age that it would take so long for you to come back?
No, well, I came back after 50 years, minus 3 months. A child sees things differently, but what I never thought is that I would come back and live to see and be able to be again a normal citizen of this country and to travel around it and visit places.
In exile, the king went first to Egypt and then to Spain.
During that period in exile in Spain, what did you do? Because I've read accounts of you being a playboy, a successful businessman.
A playboy?
Yes.
Good Lord, that's really the last thing. Everybody considers me such a social bore that that's a compliment now at 64 to know that I've been a playboy as a young boy.
So you were typecast as monarchs
I was
in
always-
exile sometimes are.
I was very closely watched and educated by my mother, who was a very strict person, may she rest in peace. And I was always very conscious of the name I bore.
Simeon Saxe-Coburg did become a businessman, and by all accounts, a successful one.
He's been engaged in commercial activities, especially in Spain. And to his credit, he is neither fussy, not particularly hoity, not with any snobbish affectations. He did try to make a living.
What sort of business are we talking about?
Well, we're talking effectively about commerce business, import, export, the kind of business that boomed in Spain in the 60s and the 70s as the Franco dictatorship collapsed there. As far as I'm aware, it was all perfectly legitimate and, on the whole, very successful.
As the king tells it, it was the night the Berlin Wall came down that he realized the tide of history was turning, not just for his country, but himself.
I didn't think I would live to see the collapse of the Soviet Empire. Somehow I had the feeling that this would go on and on and on.
And when it did collapse, how did you feel?
I was terribly moved. We watched TV with the Berlin Wall coming down, and two of my sons were there, and they suddenly said, "Dad, why do you have tears in your eyes?" I said, "Kid, when you grow up, you'll understand what it means to me."
In 1996, the then government, which was still communist though elected, invited the king to visit Bulgaria. No one, least of all the king himself, expected the magnitude of what happened in Sofia that day.
How did you feel that day?
I couldn't believe it. And I was so moved, and then suddenly I recognized places. The bridge, and the cathedral, and the town hall, and after 50 years, it was like a dream.
The stark contrast between the urbane king, his Spanish queen Margarita, and the existing leadership left an indelible impression in many minds. Here was a man who didn't just look the part sartorially, but embodied the kind of person Bulgarians would like to become themselves. The crude edges rubbed off, dignified in bearing, modest in demeanor, an easy sophistication. The king speaks 7 languages fluently, crossing between them in this campaign with a deftness that would shame any other European leader. The public buildings that once housed the royals remain in state hands, like the palace in central Sofia that shows clear signs of neglect. But 2.5 years ago, Bulgaria's constitutional court returned the family's vast private holdings, and many thought Simeon would take the money and run.
Sometimes we Bulgarians tend to be quite malicious. So some people started saying, "Oh, well, he's happy, he's got his property back, now he'll sell it, pack up, and go and stay comfortable in Madrid." And that's when I started thinking, well, before people get the wrong idea, let's prove that we can live here and contribute to this society.
And that's what you've done, which is an extraordinary thing in itself. But the country is...
I haven't done yet, I'm trying to.
And to us, the king reveals a remarkable personal agenda as well, laying to rest the demons of his childhood as the golden-haired prince whose gilded world crumbled one awful day 58 years ago. To this day, Simeon doesn't know what really happened to his father Boris, and he's still very anxious to find out.
I'd rather, as a son, expected my father died from a heart attack and not from some strange poisoning or schemes or God knows what.
Because, as you know, many people believe he was poisoned.
Yes, indeed.
Soon after coming back from a visit to Adolf Hitler.
Yes, his last visit there.
To its cost, Bulgaria had sided with Germany in the Second World War, just as it had in the First. But by 1943, Tsar Boris had had enough of Adolf Hitler.
Well, it was a very stormy visit because it asked for our troops on the East Front, which my father refused, and also to deport our Jewish population, which he also refused. So it must have been terrible for him.
While the Jews of Bulgaria had been saved, Hitler was enraged at Boris's defiance. 2 weeks after he returned to Sofia, the Tsar was dead. So popular had he been that there were extraordinary scenes of national grief. Between the wars, Bulgarians had enjoyed a period of relative prosperity. This was the beginning of the dark era from which the country is only just emerging.
Even after 60 years, you don't really know what happened there.
Well, there's no proof, so I can't say yes or no, but I mean, we've seen the heart, and definitely there is a massive clot. So it could have been a coronary. Now, whether induced or not, this can go into all kinds of interpretations, but
it still may be the case that he was poisoned.
then we have to look for the cui bono. Whom did this disappearance of the king suit most?
The answer to that is easy, but getting to the truth of what really happened is the difficult part, and Simeon won't rest until he does.
We've asked the different archives of all countries. The only one we do not have clearing yet is the documents that are in Moscow.
As it happens, foreign correspondent can tonight point the king in the direction of his lifelong quest. It's courtesy of this man, Oleg Gordievsky, a former top-ranking KGB officer and double agent who defected from the Soviet Union to the West in 1985.
I personally don't know anything about it, but what is interesting, when I joined the KGB in 1962, it was, after all, only, say, 16 years after the death of the Tsar Boris. People in the KGB showed a lot of interest to Bulgaria and to the mysterious death of the king, and discussed it quite often. And I had a strong feeling that somewhere inside the KGB there was a precise knowledge about what had happened.
Because so if the king's looking for answers,
yeah,
this is a good place for him to go.
Yes, and important thing that it's not only the sources, Bulgarian and East European sources, which helped the KGB to create a knowledge about it, but the German archives as well. Because when the Soviet Army, Red Army at the time, conquered East Germany and Berlin, they seized tremendous amounts of the German Nazi documentation. And that documentation was studied secretly for years and years and years, and also was put in the archive.
To this day, the files of the KGB remain firmly closed. But Oleg Gordievsky is urging King Simeon to make a personal approach to Russia's President Putin for permission to examine the relevant extracts.
There are very good chances that in the KGB archive, inherited from the MGB and the SMERSH, they're now amalgamated, there might be some information important for Bulgaria and for the rest of us.
And for the king.
Oh, for the
Most
king,
particularly.
particularly for the king, yes.
The Nazis are known to have been experts at developing poisons that could remain undetected in the body for long periods. It was an art the communists also used to good effect more than 30 years later to kill one of the strongest critics of the Bulgarian regime. In 1978, Georgy Markov, a Bulgarian broadcaster for the BBC, was assassinated on London's Waterloo Bridge with a poison-tipped umbrella. It was all done on the orders of the then Bulgarian dictator Todor Zhivkov, with the help of the KGB.
So the KGB did what? They provided the poison they developed. They provided the weapon. The poison was put in the pellet. The pellet was put in the end, sharp end of an umbrella. And the pellet would remain in the skin or in the flesh if the umbrella is stuck into the leg or whatever, arm of a person. Then they provided an operational officer, whom I know very well, because it was the man who interrogated me with the use of drugs in 1985. So 7 years before he went to Sofia to supervise the help operation, and one officer of the so-called operational technical department, which means technician, really, engineer, who went with the weapon, with the poison, and taught the Bulgarians how to use it. After teaching them that, The Bulgarians carried out the operation successfully in London in 1978.
This is all that remains of that extraordinary period of Bulgarian history. The baubles and memorabilia of its communist past, now the principal items on sale in its free market, the ultimate of ironies. How ironic, too, that history should come full circle, the communists driven off by the king they deposed 55 years ago, who then transforms himself into a democratically elected prime minister. All through this campaign, Simeon has been dogged with one big question. Does he intend to restore the monarchy, if not for himself, but his heirs? The succession is assured, not just with Crown Prince Kardam, but his son Boris, Simeon's grandson.
I'm not in the business of upsetting kings.
Good Lord,
Believe me.
I wouldn't think so. Why should you?
But I would.
Why should you in the first place?
A lot of people believe that you're being very evasive about this question.
Well, let them believe it. I think we have to have a series of values and priorities. And this alternative is not in my priorities.
So you're not ruling it out, but you're not ruling it in at this stage.
Who am I to rule it out? I mean, that's a title which history has put upon me. It's not my property to say, okay, I take it away or I throw it away forever.
So if it's the will of the people that you become the constitutional monarch of this country, you will do it.
Again, it's something which is so remote in my thinking and in my views of what we can achieve or what we have to do and have on hand right now, that I really wouldn't, I'd rather not go into it because it would be sort of speculation.
Of course, Simeon denies it, but the reality is that probably, deep down, that's what he's after. He's after creating a figurehead role of a head of state who could ensure that Bulgaria is integrated into Europe, but at the same time not directly involved in the day-to-day politics of the country. He probably believes that his only way of achieving that is to prove to the Bulgarians that he comes back not because of his history, not because of his title, not because of his traditions, but because of his capabilities.
So the king will need to be a successful prime minister first, and whether he can stand the rough and tumble of politics is in some doubt.
The first danger is that now we have very unrealistic expectations concerning the king's movement. People really wait a social miracle. They really expect bigger salaries now, bigger pensions now. They don't expect him to change the administration. They expect him to change their lives.
And is he going to be able to do that?
I don't believe that anybody is able to do this.
I have too much respect
Certainly,
for people
there's a problem emerging
who go into
already.
big palavers,
Kings just aren't used
then
to the
maybe
blowtorch approach.
see that something-
And I ended up upsetting Simeon anyway. He walked out of our interview when I raised the criticism made by his opponents that he was all style and no substance.
That's their privilege, sir. I don't take offense personally.
You don't. So even though
I
you're...
think that Bulgaria is worth a lot more than a couple of cheap insults. Thank you.
All over Eastern Europe, the toddler democracies that have emerged from the ashes of communism are vulnerable to the only real form of political expression nowadays, the protest vote. Anyone trying to spoon-feed the electorate the necessary medicine to cure their economic ills tends to find it splattered all over themselves at the next poll. And however noble he may be, King Simeon will be no exception.
Everything will depend on how he handles himself in the next few months. If he is able to project an image of an energetic prime minister, he may be able to gain some popularity. On the whole, however, it will be downhill for him in terms of popularity from now on.
If that's the case, then this real-life fairy tale could still end in tears at the next election in 4 years' time. But right now, most Bulgarians have their fingers crossed for a happy ending.